We are live. You know what time this is. It's time for WeatherBrains. This is episode number 723, the pre-show. This is for November 25th, 2019. This is the pre-Thanksgiving show, and it's that magical time of the show where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. So I'll be doing a couple of quick chores here to get the show distributed to the right places so we can be on television. A lot of people don't know that we are on TV, but we are locally in my market on our digital weather channel, which is carried, of course, over the air. The .2s and many of the local cable systems have that. So we have them with us at the bottom of the hour. And if you're a noob here, the deal is we start the show in about 10 minutes. So just move the slider 10 minutes in, and that's where the actual produced show will begin. So I think we just might do a homegrown show tonight with just us. And, a lot of times the people on this show are fascinating. We have some really good regulars here. And we love having guests. They're the greatest. We learn, but sometimes our own people don't have enough time to share things that are on their mind concerning the weather enterprise. And so I think we're going to do that tonight. Like my socks. This is the new winter storm socks here, complete with milk and bread. I look good in these things. I think we need to have socks for all occasions, and we could just prop our feet up and people can read into that what the weather's going to do. So, all right. So I think we are in the right places here. So let's go in and invite our regulars. And for those that might be listening later, this is the pre-Thanksgiving episode. So I would imagine some of our regulars might be traveling. A lot of folks are kind of taking this whole week off. I don't. I have worked every Thanksgiving since 1973. And if you've heard me speak before, that's one of my lines. I've not slept since 1973. 1973 was the year when I was in high school. I started working for a radio station. Stayed up late at night, had to sign on early in the morning. But I have typically worked every Thanksgiving. In fact, I honestly think in all how many years of this, I've not had a Thanksgiving off, which is fine because I typically get Christmas off in exchange for working Thanksgiving. So it's kind of a trade-off. So let's see who else we can invite on here. Let's just invite everybody. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that's everybody. Okay, they have been invited, so we'll see if we can get them on here in just a little bit. But concerning Christmas, and I typically take Christmas week off, so we are going to record the Christmas week show on December 19th. So we'll do a show Monday the 16th and Thursday the 19th, and then we'll get back on the regular schedule the following week on December 30th, and that'll be the year ender with Greg Carbon, who always joins us every year for his meteorological memories, a look back at the big weather events of the year. And that will be on New Year's Eve, December 30th. And then we've got a Boston situation, AMS in Boston. That's going to be in January. And I'm about 72.3% sure I can go to that. There's still some uncertainty. We should issue some type of probabilistic outlook for me going to that. I really want to get there. Number one, I love Boston. I'm a Boston guy. And number two, I don't get to spend much time in Boston in winter. And I would love to experience a classic nor'easter. And if you're going to do it, that's a great time to be there. But the other thing, this is AMS 100. This is the 100th anniversary. So it's going to be a huge event. And, at the NWA, I'm typically so busy and I'm involved in so many things that I don't get to go to as many sessions as I like. But at AMS, you can really map out the sessions you'd like to attend and actually learn something. To me, that is just a critical part of what we do is continuing education. And as I get older, I know how much we don't know. So it's just going to be a marvelous opportunity to learn and obviously to see a lot of old friends. So if I can make it, we will try and originate the show from Boston on Monday, January 13th, which is the Monday night of AMS. Of course, naturally, since I'm not going to know if I can go for sure until a little bit longer, I have to wait until the last minute to register. So I'll probably be staying in Long Island or something. Who knows? I know all the core hotels are booked, but that's okay. I might just stay over there in the back bay at our Fenway Park places we always hang out at. But anyway, so that's the deal. So, and if nobody shows, I could just go on a tirade here for 2 hours and just, be like Howard Beale. Anybody ever heard of the movie Network? I want to say this was out in the 70s, 40 years ago. But there was this guy, kind of a lunatic network news anchor that went ballistic. And I could be like Howard Beale and just go on a tirade for 2 hours. But yeah, I do think it's a homegrown show. And again, since a lot of folks are out for Thanksgiving, we'll see if anybody else shows up here. And I'll tell you what, it's 27 after the hour and there's no one else here. Uh-oh. Got a note from Aubrey. She is out. Says, just getting back to the studio, I may have somehow committed to another dance performance. Now, just last week, she said she was done, and now she's dancing again. Dance performance for charity, and I have a bunch of stuff to do to get ready for the show. And Kevin sent a note. He is having to do all of the newscasts, including his 9 o'clock Central Time newscast. So we'll see if Kevin can make it. But I'm not seeing Kim or Dr. John with a note, so I was hoping that they could join us tonight. Maybe Nate. Nate, I think he's been teaching a class on Monday nights, which has prevented him from being here. We'd love to have him back and talk about the state of broadcast meteorology. For those that don't know, Nate is in charge of the NBC O&Os, the owned and operated stations all across the country, the weather operation. I forget what his exact title is, but he would certainly have some very interesting perspectives on where all of this is going. And Kim, I've always got questions for Kim. I have learned so much from those that are experts in social science. Wow, it's 28 after. We have 2 minutes before showtime, and there's nobody here. This has never happened before. What can we do? We can talk about socks. I could be like a pitch man for weather clothing. What's that website, Helicity, that sells all the and I don't think this came from Helicity. I want to say this came from a local vendor here that they sent me these as a gift. And I'm always thankful for these. I will pull these out at the right occasion. They look awfully warm as well. So we could just invite some random people. That'd be kind of cool. Get some random listeners or viewers. Come on in, man. You can be on the show this week. So we're T-minus 1 minute from joining the television side, and it's just little old me. So if it's just little old me, I can do this. Now, what I'll do is do some screen sharing here. I got to pull up some stuff, and I can do that. And what I might do, if it's just me, is kind of go through what I intended to talk about at the NWA annual meeting earlier this year, and I got sidetracked and went totally off the rails, discussing the situation with the National Weather Service in Birmingham and the president. Ooh, Aubrey is here. You just said you weren't going to be here. I'm so glad you're here. My heart is happy. You're dancing again.
Can you hear me, James?
Yes.
Okay, so I pulled up the audio on live.bigbrainsmedia.com to listen to it while I put some stuff for the show together. And I felt so bad that no one else was on that I hopped on.
This has never happened. By the way, welcome to our television viewers. No, it's we were about to start WeatherBrains here. No, this has never happened. I mean, Kevin said he might try and join late, but I've not. I thought Kim and Dr. John would be here.
I thought at least Kim would be on, and so I just got back to studio about 10 minutes ago, and you can see how disheveled I am because I've been dancing for the last 2.5 hours.
So how did this happen? Before you go, how did this happen? So you said you were taking a break, you're done. How did this happen?
Okay, so on the night of Dancing with the Stars, one of the other professional dancers turned to me as we were kind of waiting to go on, and she said, "Hey, I've got a friend who's doing this lip sync battle, and she's doing a weather song and wanted to know if you would be part of this surprise performance and be our, kind of part of this weather theme that we're doing." She's like, "You don't have to do a lot. It's just like this one small piece in this weather song. And it's just a little bit of practice." And I said, "All right, sure." I'm pretty, at this point, I must've had a drink. So I'm sure, and I was probably hopped up on adrenaline at some point. So I was like, sure. It was for charity. I didn't even know that this lip sync battle had even existed until like 3 weeks ago. Apparently they've been doing it for 5 years. It's another big charity thing locally that they were doing. Well, I started this practice yesterday, and I was there for 3 hours. They put me in 2 songs, and in this full line of backup dancers. It's a whole local secret, so no one here knows that I'm doing this. Oh. But I just went to practice at 6:45 tonight, and I've been practicing until like 9:15. And it's in 2 weeks. I don't have to raise any money, so thank goodness for that. But I have been learning 2 new dances. James, what's happened to me?
It's just, I guess it's a whole new career opportunity. I'll be watching. I'm watching the network in front of me here, and the National Dancing with the Stars is on tonight. I guess it's the finale.
Oh, is it the finale tonight? Okay.
Because the ratings end Wednesday nights. In fact, I'm watching my little buddy from Tuscaloosa's on there dancing now, Hannah. So you'll be on this show in no time. I see it coming.
Not so much.
Kim, I'm glad you're here because Aubrey's got to go, and it was going to be me to go on a tirade for 2 hours.
I had to save James, Kim. I had to save him. I pulled up the live link to listen, and poor James, and I was like, I've got to save him. So what's going on, Kim?
Hang on, time out. Let's start the show here because we're missing the good stuff. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 723. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 25th of November, 2019. This is the pre-Thanksgiving show, and we are glad you're here. And man, it's a thin crowd, but by golly, the important ones are here. So what was really scary for those that are listening to this and not watching live, it got to 29 after the hour, 1 minute from showtime, and I was by my little old self. And by the kindness of her heart, Aubrey, who was not scheduled to be on the show, and she's got stuff to do, she joined in just to save me. So, Aubrey, thank you for saving me. My heart is warm that you would be willing to do that for me. So thank you.
Well, it's, James and his ladies tonight, apparently.
Yeah. So, Kim, I'm glad you're here. And we knew going in, this is going to be a thin show because it's Thanksgiving week and a lot of people are out and they're traveling, but going through the woods and over the river to grandmama's house.
You know what? Forget the newscast. I'll wing it. I'm going to stick around for a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
Woo! All right.
Yes. So it's just going to be the 3 of us, I think, tonight, which is great. I love a homegrown show because quite frankly, we all have things we want to say sometimes and topics we want to discuss, but we just don't have time to do that. So first off, Kim, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm sorry that I've cut things down to the wire. I'm just like probably some others tonight, just juggling a bunch of things. My little one would not sleep, so that was exciting. But I apologize for being late. I'm sorry that it caused you a moment of panic that you might have to spend 2 hours doing your own show. Now, I would not put it past you, James Spann, to be able to fill 2 hours, and it would not just be filled, it would be riveting content. In fact,
It would be a good one.
it would be a
You know
good
what-
one. It might be one of the finer
Oh, yeah.
shows, just all by yourself.
Agreed.
what I was going to do, I was actually I'm thinking, okay, I could actually present what I was going to present at the National Weather Service or National Weather Association annual meeting that never got presented because I went off the rails. You submit an abstract and they approve your, presentation and all this. And so I get up there and just go off topic the whole time.
I mean, I'm not opposed to hearing this.
Right?
No.
Okay, we
No,
could
no,
do
no.
this. We could do
No,
this. We could just give
Right?
talks.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll mention a few little things about it, but we have all presented at these conferences, and often I am so random and I have ADD or something where I just totally go off topic. But anyway, maybe we'll talk about that. So, and Kevin said he might try and jump in, kind of like Aubrey. He's got to do his 9:00 Central Time newscast down in Wichita Falls. Where's Troy tonight? I thought Troy might be joining us
right? I
down in
didn't
Austin.
see anything from Troy.
Or Dr. John. Maybe Troy and Dr. John are having a cocktail in Lancaster or Austin or something. I don't know.
Well, early turkey dinner.
Yeah. So, and again, we are also in late November, which can be an amazingly active time for weather in the United States, the contiguous United States where we are. And sure enough, we've got a pretty impressive snowstorm coming out of Denver and Casper and Cheyenne and Salt Lake City. I don't know if you ladies have seen the video today. And that's going to spread, up through, and I guess we'll do the weather roundup first, through the, central and high plains up toward the UP of Michigan with a lot of snow, which is not odd for this kind of thing to happen. And in the trailing, south of the low in the warm sector, we have a risk of severe storms tomorrow night through Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri. And we see those boogers a lot. And then there's a second one that we'll deal with over the upcoming weekend. And, so it might be that some of our folks are busy dealing with weather issues. I look back on every date in late November down here in the Deep South in Dixie Alley, and we can look back on these historical tornado days in November. This is the core of the late fall season here. So I don't think we have any issues here. But
why don't you talk about that a little bit, James, because I think that's what a lot of people do forget about is the holidays and how the severe risk can really hit the Deep South on the holidays, and they can be kind of unforgiving this time of the year, Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Yeah, and both of those holidays fall within the severe weather season here. Although, I've been looking at stats lately, and we've got a pretty good spike in November, a very well-defined spike. But really and truly, for years and years and years, I've always said to the public, we have two distinct periods of maximum tornado activity in Dixie Alley. One is spring, March, April, May. The other is late fall, November, December. But over the last 15, 20 years, you look at December, January, February, those numbers are almost identical, which means, it's just like we started in November and we go through May. Now we have a very well-defined lull in the summer season when the westerlies retreat north. But yeah, it's always been a problem for us. We have had some very tragic tornado episodes this time of the year. And I don't think the risk is that huge tomorrow night, but it's something to watch. So Kim, how does this affect you in Oklahoma City? Snow, thunderstorms, rain? What happens there in Norman?
Yeah, it looks like our severe potential will really be Friday. So, right before it hits you guys. And we're planning some of our Thanksgiving arrangements around it because it's the day that you would typically be driving home, right? So it might affect our Black Friday shopping planning too. But yeah, no, it's the same pattern, very progressive, and just one thing after another. So we'll be And this is again, welcome to Kim, having not seen a whole lot of the weather. I did get to catch our local broadcasters a bit before joining the show. Are you going to kick me off of weather brains? Does it have to be forecaster brains? It's going to be like
No.
also
No.
also research scientists, totally unaware of current reality brains. I hope I'm still welcome.
I will say, some of the most intelligent brainiacs in this science, these incredible PhDs like Kim, they aren't necessarily the greatest weather forecasters because this is not what they do. They don't get in here and do this day in and day out, Aubrey, like we do. They're not the low-level practitioners like we are.
I mean, it's just like, I'm not a researcher, I mean, I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a great researcher. So, I mean, they kind of, they don't go hand in hand. So it's two ends of a spectrum more.
Yeah, we all play our role. And I think, as much as I hate that you say the word like low level, I don't see it that way at all. I think if we were operating in our own bubble, we would never do any good. It's only through our partnerships with you all and our friends in the private sector, other kinds of ventures, and the Weather Service that the public really benefits. So we can't all be everything to everyone. I think that's important for our listeners, even for themselves, to think about. Hopefully my example can be one that it can be so easy to look at somebody from the outside and think that they do everything, have everything together, are perfect. We all are juggling. And so if you see somebody who's succeeding in one area, there's probably some other area that, they're not attending to as much. Except for James, maybe it's because you never sleep. I don't know.
No.
You seem to be everywhere at once.
Yes, so that is my biggest struggle. And let's talk about time management. And I'm hearing, who's that walking?
That's my our legendary anchor Bob Corso, who's been here for more than 30 years.
Oh,
he can do whatever he wants.
We have an anchor man in the studio.
We do have an anchor man.
Yes, good evening. So I want to talk about time management and mental health and everything else. I've got about 30 things I'd like to talk about tonight. My biggest struggle in life is time management. And I want to ask both of you just some tips on this, because I will tell you, I am not the only one that struggles with this. Sometimes I will veer over into some of these, weathercaster forums and social, groups that they have. And I see that people struggle with the same thing. And I often joke about it, but the truth is it's not healthy. I don't care who you are, how strong you are, sleeping 3 hours a night doesn't work.
Nope.
And in this new world, most people get weather here. They don't get it on television. They get it on their phone. The phones never turn off. You are constantly under a demand to respond to viewers' questions and comments and put out products and services on a digital platform that never, ever, ever goes to bed. So, Aubrey, what's the deal with you? I mean, how do you manage your schedule?
It's over. Actually, since I stopped doing Dancing with the Stars as of last Sunday, I did not. Okay, so last week, Monday through Friday, I did not get up off the couch until I absolutely had to shower to get ready for work at like 12:45. And I found myself doing less social media last week. I was not scrolling through Twitter before work very much. I think I would glance at it just a little bit. Saturday morning, I think I glanced at it a little bit. And even at night, I just found myself not really engaging and social. And that was and I was kind of conscious of it, going, this is nice. This is nice to put the phone down. It was next to me, but it was down. I wasn't on social, and our weather's been quiet, so it wasn't missing anything. But and it was kind of, I kind of felt torn. Was I missing something? Should I have been posting, okay, great temperatures today? Should I have just been posting a random picture just to be on social, just to stay active on social? Should I have really been doing it? Or should I have really been enjoying my time that I really have kind of been enjoying not doing a darn thing over the last week because I was so exhausted? So, and it really didn't hit me until this last week. Okay, how can I better manage my time? Because now that I'm done with this big project I've been working on for the last 3-4 months, it's what do I have to do around my house? What projects can I now work on? And the weather, I feel like, is the social media has kind of taken a little bit more of that back step, because there are some things that I haven't been able to do that I have been wanting to do. So I've kind of been wrestling with that the last 7 days of trying to manage my time better and maybe taking a little bit more time for myself, especially while the weather pattern is quiet.
I think one thing we have to look at, Kim, and maybe you can help us. I do think there is an element of addiction. We often, Kevin mocks us for being involved in this so much. And I think there has to be a little bit of that probably for me. And I'm not necessarily addicted to getting on the tweeter and the face bag and all these things. I am addicted to working hard and winning. And I think that might be a testosterone problem. I don't like to lose. And, we are rated on this thing every minute. In the television world, you get overnight ratings, but in the social media world, you can walk into these newsrooms and they've got a list of all the local people and how they're doing in social media engagement. And I don't like to walk in that newsroom or pull up my phone. I don't even know where this is. Social news desk, I think. And I don't like to be number two. I want to win. And, the question is, when do you stop? When do you step back? And my position has always been this. If somebody asks me a question about the weather, will it be raining at the Alabama-Auburn game Saturday? What's the temperature going to be like? I'm going to Kansas City for Thanksgiving. When does the bad weather start there? And I'm honored that they came to me, and I feel obligated to answer. But Kim, and goodness, I can't even imagine being in your situation with child and your career. How in the world do you manage your time?
It's interesting. I can't imagine the pressures you guys have for that attentional resource of social media, having to balance multiple platforms. I think one of the things that helps me personally is to just have one. And I really have restricted it to just personal use. I do talk about weather quite a bit on there, but it's always with a sort of personal. Gosh, I'm trying to avoid politics. It's what I was just thinking about. That's why social media is so draining these days. Politics, but I just choose one platform and really stick with it. And I know that probably my career would be improved if I was on something public facing like Twitter. I know that weather Twitter is a huge thing. And I do follow it sort of passively through other people, but that's one way that I try to find balance is I also am just enough of a self-conscious person that if I put something onto public facing social media, I would be so anxious about how it's being received. Mm-hmm. I would always be worried that there was somebody who I didn't know who took something I said in a context I didn't mean it and would be responding harshly or, judging me, critiquing me for something completely bizarre. This is something I know you guys also just deal with in broadcast every day. I would find that very, very difficult. And so I restrict a little bit of that space, and that helps me a lot. I think we all have to make our choices and find our balance in what we're comfortable with these platforms. And I hope that if there are any aspiring students listening or other young professionals, you can hear what I'm saying and know that you don't have to be on every platform all the time in order to be successful. You really don't. Social media is promoted so much, but it is not nearly the only means through which people can come to know you and your work. And there are plenty of other means and other venues. So that's one of the things I do. Our friend of the show, Kevin Clazel, who was just on a couple weeks ago with Lightning Guy, he's been affectionately
Thor.
Thor Guard,
yeah.
Lightning
Thor
Guy.
Guard.
He and I were both speaking at a little gathering we had at the National Weather Center because it's the AMS Centennial. I actually have my AMS Centennial cup here, 100 years.
Ooh.
For being a counselor on AMS, we get fancy swag. They give us only the best cups for our service. So I was talking with him afterwards, and he asked me about exactly this, about the work-life balance and how it is that I do it, and how especially did I prioritize like sort of the work life. And I told him very honestly, I come home at the end of the day and I have to take care of my kid and my husband, you know, and have a family life. And that is the part of my life, as much as weather is an enormous part of who I am. The enduring part of my life will be my family. And so I put that first, and it's probably going to cost me, you know, career advancement speed or something. And I told him I have very forgiving coworkers who understand that sometimes things pile up, and they've been very kind to work with me and understand when that happens. But if I don't have that balance, I won't be there at all. I mean, you just burn out, or you're frustrated and angry and not somebody that people want to work with. So this is an extremely important issue. And I think in the modern world, the battlefront is really your personal boundaries and your personal space, and being very intentional about your time. Even if you are spending it, you know, working, at least being intentional, that's what you want to be doing with it. Don't fritter it away on this, you know, that would be really easy to do. Do things that are meaningful with it, even if it is just sitting, you know, reading a book or sitting and staring at space. Don't waste it on the things that are so easy to just passively do or consume. The world offers infinite of those, and you won't feel the better for that, and you won't grow for that either.
I am so lucky. I am so fortunate, ladies. You know, I came up raising my wife and I, we've been married for 38 years, and we raised our two boys in an era really before this all kicked in. And I was basically concerned about doing television at night and doing some radio in the morning and speaking to a school. I didn't have to deal with that. And all of that time I used to coach baseball games. I used it to go to plays in third grade. I went to the Thanksgiving feast in first grade. And I look back on my life and I do not have any regrets, even though the schedule was harsh back then. You know, anytime you work nights, it's harsh, but I just don't have any regrets. And today, in order to win at this game, goodness, I can't even imagine that. So it's just, but I think you're right.
I have to go in a second, but can I ask real quick, with you being so enthralled in weather and being who you are in the deep South, can I ask with your boys, what is their interest in weather? Do they do they know any? I mean, do they even care? Do they have a little understanding? What is their take on weather and meteorology?
So neither one of them are working in this professionally. One is interested, the firstborn, but he knows it's not a career thing for him. He doesn't want to do this for a living. The other has zero interest. I mean, he doesn't even know what the weather's going to do tomorrow. He doesn't know, doesn't care. He's in a different world. You know, it's funny how just a few people have this thing that's born within them, this fascination with weather, and it seems to be really random. Yeah, but Aubrey, you go take care of news, because I got 72 questions for Kim. We'll see you back for an email segment in about
Sounds
30
good.
minutes. So Kim, I want you to be perfectly honest, okay? This is honest time, all right? I need you to be honest. Do not lie. We're just talking between us on this show right now. Grade us that are in the communication business, and I guess old school television meteorologists, on how we have integrated knowledge that you have, and you have done your best to bestow on us. Give us just a grade, and I say us in general. You are, come on, you know who we are, you know what we do. You've been trying to teach us for 8 years, or me for 8 years, and I think others for 8 years. Give us a grade on integration of social science knowledge into the weather communication business, especially when there's dangerous weather.
Sure. That is a really interesting question. I'm willing to bet that you are taking insights and doing things with them that I don't even know. And that's actually something that not to make you self-conscious or anything, but that's something that we're aiming to study a little bit to understand how communication practices might be changing. You might not even be fully conscious of anything you're doing specifically, but that you might have heard a talk that someone like me gave, and that really inspired you to go out and to do things. I actually was thinking about this the other day. You bring up the siren issue a lot. You undoubtedly heard about that through social scientists who were talking about, sirens and issues that people had reporting, if they felt that they were unwarned because they were expecting a siren. Issues like that could come up for some people. And I think that you've made it a bit of a fixture too in some of the public outreach that you do. It's not just about what you're doing on the screen day to day. It's also about everything that you're doing in your community. And so I think the answer to that really is something I should turn this back to you and ask what all you see yourself doing. One example I will give that I think is, to me, extremely inspiring about our field. Harold Brooks at the Severe Storms Lab did a research study where he was looking at the Weather Service in particular. But I think the Weather Service in this case will operate as a microcosm of our whole field. The Weather Service, and he was looking at how warnings have changed over especially the previous decade. And he found that after the tornadoes of 2011, after this, there was this idea that was popularized that maybe false alarms are too high. He found that the entire Weather Service acted to try to reduce false alarms. And he saw it first in the South, where the probability of detection and lead time went down just slightly in some places, but the false alarm ratio went way down. And that practice ended up then the next year growing and coming to other parts of the Weather Service outside of Southern region. There was Central region and Eastern region and Western region. Eventually, he even detected this signal. And the change was so fast. And it happened without there even being Weather Service policy to do it. What that means is everyone in the Weather Service became concerned as individuals, because individuals are the ones who issue warnings. It's not some, office policy or some, automated thing that does it. It's individuals that make a choice. And they were looking at that and they said, we want to do what is right for our people. And they did it in unison. And the organizational change that meant was so stunning. He gave this talk at the Weather Center, and there was a political scientist in the audience. Dr. Joe Ripberger. Many of our listeners may be familiar with some of his work. He does a lot of public side response work, but in this case, he listened to this and he said, do you realize how profound and important that organizational change is? You don't see that in most organizations. It takes forever to get them to make any kind of change. But here we had a whole group of public servants who are dedicated to the idea that they could maybe do something a little bit differently, and in their estimation, perhaps help somebody in doing it. And they changed their practices, perhaps even unconsciously. I bet that if you'd surveyed the Weather Service, they wouldn't have thought that that was even something that they were changing as drastically as they did. And I would venture to guess that the same kinds of things happen in broadcast, happen in the private sector, things that it takes a researcher to go through and take something measurable to detect the change, that you might not even be aware that you're doing it. But I've been astonishingly impressed with just so many facets of our field, how they're trying to take this on. It makes it a little bit difficult as a researcher, especially in NOAA, where they like things that are countable and very well defined. As we're talking about this whole research to applications, research to operations, transition space, how do you manage this handoff when things are happening that we have no control over, honestly. In the social sciences, we may do research, present it at a conference, you hear us, and then you go and you make some decision, you change something. It's not easily countable or something that's to our credit or even to yours, but it happens nonetheless. So with that, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts, having heard that bit of research and what I thought is going on. And I'd love to hear your own feelings about, do you feel that there are things you've heard that you have taken into your practices, whether they be on air broadcasting or even the things you do in outreach? And how do you feel that the field is doing with it?
Well, and let me just say, I worry sometimes about me, and I'm coming to conclusions in a way that's not particularly healthy or right. And you've
Mm,
heard me say this before. One of the things I do, I hang out in Dollar Generals and Walmarts, and I will talk with people in Dollar Generals and Walmarts and do my best to listen to them over their concerns about, and again, this is mainly about severe weather and tornadoes, not necessarily the daily forecast stuff. This is about mitigating loss of life during a severe weather / tornado outbreak. And so I'm worried, Ken, that I'm just using this kind of random data, which is not a scientific collection.
mm.
It is not done in a way that maybe you should do, but I just take these random comments and I take that and run with it. Well, maybe I shouldn't. But I will say, once we grasp onto something, you're right. We all want to work together and we want to change the culture and change things. The FAR is a great example. And what's amazing to me, I've heard you say over and over that maybe the FAR is not as important as we think it is. I've heard you say that, and
Yeah.
we need. Let me rephrase that. I need to quit being so stubborn and think, well, man, I hang out in the Dollar General in Gordo and I go to the Walmart and all these places. I know people better than some researcher in Oklahoma. And that's not really a good attitude. But the FAR thing, it was locally, the Sioux here, and came to us and we just talked. We often get together, whether it be an IWT meeting or something else. And we just decided that this sucks. The FAR was 83 here in 2011, which means 83% of tornado warnings were false alarms. I don't think that's good. I mean, I can't imagine people that not affecting people. It's got to be a cry wolf thing. And
Mhm.
so we challenged each other to go in and look, and let's just go back to basic science and see what's wrong. And Kevin Laws did a great job with that. He found mainly that they were issuing these warnings, for these high-based storms that have never produced a tornado here. And they did some really good research, and they came to some very good conclusions. And that sucker dropped down to in the 20s and 30s at one point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
have we wasted our time doing this when we could be focusing our energy on something else? I don't know. And I see evidence of this all the time. I will see people flocking to these social media amateur weather sites that are constantly forecasting a snowstorm 3 weeks in advance. It's going to be the snowstorm of the year. It's going to cripple everything. Or a hurricane coming up on a certain spot, or a tornado outbreak. And of course, it's dead wrong, but people, they don't seem to mind. And they come back and back and back and back to these people, and their numbers keep growing exponentially. And before you know it, they're the big voice, and their false alarm ratio is 98. So I think
Yeah.
I'm guilty of not listening to you and those in your field describe what's important. And I think we have raised some of these issues to a point where maybe they're not a big deal like we think they are. And FAR might be one of them. And the other is the siren thing, and I think what happened, I took a death kind of personally in 2012. This was January of 2012. This is not the big generational deal in 2011. This was the next year where a 16-year-old girl died. And the grieving father later that day said, we didn't hear the siren. This was a pre-dawn tornado, 4 a.m. Lead time was really good. It was 30 minutes or so for this. And that triggered something in me. And I think sometimes, Kim, I'm guilty of running with emotion and not logic and not with data. I need to be more data driven. And I think sometimes we've gotten too carried away with the siren thing and the FAR thing, where you've got hard facts and research that we need to have. So I would grade ourselves with a
Yeah.
C. I'll give ourselves a grade when it comes
Okay.
to integrating social science into operational meteorology on the broadcast side, the communication side. And we have to do better. And what I think you could help us with, and those in your field, is to prioritize things. So we had loss of life. You were there down here in Lee County this year, where
Mhm.
23 people died. what happened, what went wrong, what can we do to fix it. Not that it's an easy answer, but I guess I'm just asking for a priority list of things we need to fix. And if we all decide together to do it, we can do it, but you've got to help us. And that's where I'm just
Yeah,
asking for help.
that's a really interesting point, and I'm glad that you raised that about, the false alarm ratio, and the question about, is it as strong of an issue as some might say. I think you raising all of that brings up a lot of challenges. So I gave the sort of positive spin of, I think we're being listened to, and in some respects, that has the change can happen so quickly when people feel that there is something there to listen to and to sink your teeth into. One of the challenges is that a lot of what you might do has a trade-off, and we don't, for the false alarm ratio problem, for example, we don't know what's better, having a false alarm or a missed event. It might be that what Kevin was finding is it was looking at these really narrow sets of events that were really the drivers of the local false alarm ratio, and saying, well, are those really worth warning on as aggressively? Do we have to catch every single bug in our net, or can we really aim for the butterflies and let the flies go? Is sort of where that line has to be drawn. And in that conversation, you realize there is no perfect. There is no way that we are ever going to be perfect. And the sooner that we embrace that idea, the sooner that we can come to some more realistic expectations for ourselves and for the people who are going to be heeding our messages. Because as much as we cannot be perfect, they too cannot be perfect. And this idea that you have to be perfect sometimes operates to the detriment of the good. It's that saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And the more that I go on through my career, the more that phrase really, really, really resonates with me. So I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of freedom to explore the issues a little bit, take a deep breath. If we think there's something that's a problem, we can discuss it, but this is one of the things that I think it's better for me not to engage in weather Twitter too directly for. Weather Twitter can get really bound up in some of these issues. Someone will suggest that something is the problem, and the next day you'll wake up and it's just the worst thing to ever be happening, and everyone should be concerned about it. And everyone is suddenly freaking out about the color scales that different stations use to talk about the SPC probabilities. And all the while, I mean, the social science community, we look at that and we cannot construct a study as quickly as these issues get spun up on Twitter. And we cannot give you answers as quickly as someone becomes worried about something that may or may not be a problem. Most of the questions that are perplexing to the field of meteorology right now, they aren't coming from the social sciences. We're not the ones who came forward saying that we thought inconsistency was a huge problem that was killing anyone. We're starting to do research to try to explore whether that is a challenge that we should tackle as a field, but we don't have recommendations for you, unfortunately. But there's a little bit of the field leading us in that respect, and we're happy to go where there are concerns, but we're also trying to do research in new areas where technologies haven't dropped yet, and we're trying to make sure that when they drop, that things are really well thought out. Things like trying to increase the ways that we're communicating probabilistic information. We're really just even trying to wrap our arms around what will be your questions and what will be your challenges before it hits you, so that we can be sure that it lands with as soft a touch as possible and has the greatest societal benefit before it ever goes out. So, to your plea for me to have answers and to make recommendations and have priority lists, I think I also would turn that back around to your field and say, have a sense for really well articulated priorities and strong grounding in why you think something might be a challenge that needs to be addressed. The more that we can work together to identify what the problems even are, the faster we'll be able to work in the social science community and the operations community together to address the issue. So I gave a talk to a student group this week, and they had just wonderful questions. I was talking about the facets program, communicating probabilistic information, and what I'm calling the multiple reference class problem. We're actually getting to a place where we might throw not just one probability at people, like right now we're throwing probability of precipitation, the rain probability at them. We might give you 3 pieces of information all at the same time. Can people make sense of this is a fundamental question. And I was talking about this, and the students were challenging me with so many great questions about how it would all work. And to every question I had to say, that is something we have on our whiteboard to deal with sometime. We don't have, there aren't a lot of us. And so I encourage patience as this process develops. The idea of how to take social science knowledge and apply it is still so new and in a fairly tender stage of development. Please be patient with us as we work. There's like a little caution sign I'm putting up here: men at work. Everyone have your hard hats on. It sounds like a simple thing to ask, but it's not.
Yeah. I think one of our biggest problems is that we try and nose into your business. Sometimes we think we know more than the social scientist about human behavior, and that's not true. It's not.
Often.
I mean, you know what I mean, and I know you get frustrated with boneheads like me that do that, and we've got to stop that. And I've said this before. My first major in college was electrical engineering, and then I meandered into meteorology. I've never taken a class in human behavior, social science, TV, none of this. And I'm having to learn a lot of this on the fly, this communication stuff, and the social science. We need to leave it to you and let you guide us, which leads me into you mentioned something that I was going to ask about: probabilistic severe weather warnings. So down here in the deep south, and I thought about that when my brain never shuts down. Some people are like, I can't sleep, my brain's always working, and I just think of crazy things. I was driving down the road one day and I was thinking, for the last 40 years, I have done my best to get away from pop when communicating weather, using more descriptive terms and windows where rain is more likely. And and the biggest problem here is air mass thunderstorms. You know the deal, Kim. We deal with this stuff every year. It's June, July, and August. I say the same thing every stinking day, or just about every day. Hot, humid, partly sunny, scattered afternoon and evening thunderstorms. Probability of precipitation is 30% or 20. And so what good does that do the mom that's planning her son's birthday party outside at 4:00 in the afternoon? Probability of precipitation 30%. Well, is it going to rain at my birthday party? I don't know. I have no earthly idea. We know there'll be a few storms around, but we don't know where. They're random. I can't help you. And so I've tried to get away from that because people just get mad. I'm getting that 20% off my windshield right now with my windshield wipers. We've all been down this with these air mass storms, but I think it's apples and oranges. As I read about facets, and I need to get out to that test bed deal and really get plugged into this. But I think I'm trying to compare issues that are night and day apart, right?
I think you're really onto something with that's very much how I feel about it. It's hard to talk about what facets is when pop is the only reference point you have, because the problem with pop is exactly what you were just saying. You are actually giving people the information that they need when you give them all those other qualifiers. When you talk about it being pop-up storms, and so that tells it implicitly, oh, it'll be here and there. It's not going to necessarily be everywhere. Not to make that sound like a Dr. Seuss rhyme, but I have a 1-year-old, so that's what came out. But that is exactly the problem with pop. It's not that people don't get numbers. People actually are decent with numbers, and they understand that there's uncertainty in the forecast. When you say that the temperature forecast is 75, they actually infer that there's a window around that it actually will be something between 73 and 77. Research has shown us this. People know that point estimates, they get it. They know that we're giving them our best guess estimate, but they are the most likely case, but they know that there's an envelope of possibilities. The problem with pop is people don't know what's called the reference class of the information. It's everything that comes after the number. You say the number, and then you say, percent chance of what it is. People think that you mean it'll rain 30% of the day or 30% of the time, something like this.
And or 30% of the area.
30% of the
area.
Coverage,
yeah, right.
Yes, exactly. And they don't relate it to this very abstract climatological definition, which is what it is. Sort of 30% of the days with conditions like today, it's rained somewhere, and in some very minuscule amount to verify it. That is just not at all how people think about it. Meteorologists have essentially, in creating this product, we created a product that pleases us, that we could quantify, and it was never designed with the way that people would approach that number in mind. If we had done that, we would have created something very different. And it's been up to people like you in the broadcast community to give all that other information, which is actually what people want. People want to know if it'll be scattered. People want to know when it'll happen. People want to know how long it'll happen for. And so I think this is where the Facets program can learn a lesson from what's been a very interesting natural experiment with pop. And we can try to do it a little differently. And that's exactly what we're trying to do by bringing in practitioners like broadcasters and emergency managers. And in our work with the public, we're not just delving into how can we best get people to process numeric information, numbers. We're actually trying to figure out things like, well, how do they reason about severe weather threat? And what is it exactly that they want to know about it? One of the most interesting projects that I've enjoyed seeing in the test bed has been a graduate student, Kenzie Krochak. And she has worked between the Storm Prediction Center and in the social sciences, sort of developing things with the forecasters in SPC and the experimental test bed setting, and then bringing them over to our emergency management room. And what she's created has been a timing product. She's done some research where she's found that in most places, severe weather tends to happen within about a 4-hour window where it's most likely. That's where SPC tends to get their reports. SPC knows this. They know that you're not getting severe weather all day long. In most places, you get it over this sort of narrow window of time. But that window isn't very clearly communicated right now. You get the SPC daily probs. Even if you were to read the discussion, pouring for time information is a little bit tough right now. So she's created a timing tool that's just called Potential Severe Timing. And it has the region, if you look at a national map, it just has little circles for, well, here's a 4-hour window of time when severe could happen for you, and here for you, and here for you. It's sort of a national view of what a lot of local offices do with these maps that give timing. That tool has been one of the most valuable things our EM partners, emergency management partners, have seen. It's simple. It actually takes some of the information that's out there and distills it and adds some of the value of research. In the research we've done on severe weather reports, for example, and in climatology, and it bakes it into this very approachable little tool that people feel like they could take a picture of it and share it with partners and with the public very easily and not risk misinterpretation. And as much as that doesn't seem like a probabilistic tool, it implicitly is, because it's really narrowing in on the most likely 4-hour window. And so it's about probabilities, but the aspect we're giving information about is time. So we're thinking about things in a very different way. We're opening the box to sort of look at what is the array of what's out there and what's possible. It's not necessarily to make things more complicated. I think if we do our job right, we will actually just make things much more clear and less complicated. At least that is the hope. So I hope that helps you to understand a little bit of the difference. But why I also, pop, I think is very unapproachable for me. And it's almost a shame that it's so deeply ingrained in, I don't think it could ever be changed. But that's a shame, because we really could say much more relevant things to people than we do through that number.
So here's my next question. And this is, again, this is something where I do think that there's research, at least where I am, to prove this. But so facets will involve graphics and maps. And we've had reason to believe that where we are, at least in the Deep South, and we think this might be more widespread than that, people have a hard time understanding graphics that we show them on television that consist of maps. Because, and these are some very brilliant people that are not good with geography, but it's these phones, turn by turn directions. This has changed everything. You don't unfold a map now when you've stopped on the side of the road in your car and figure out where you're going. You just tell Siri or Google or Alexa, whatever, how do I get here? And so facets is obviously going to be involving maps. And the question is, what if people can't understand it? And you've heard me say this before, and it's true. I will post, I work really hard to make a simple map that people can understand. And you work for maybe 15 minutes on getting this map graphic together. These are the approximate arrival times of the squall line or a storm in your area. And you look at the comments on Facebook, and the first 18 questions: what about East Aboga? What about Andalusia? What about Opp? What about Oxford? What about Cullman? What about Clanton? What about Brent? What about Centerville? What about Fayette? What about Millport? What about Hamilton? What about Winfield? What about Cedar Bluff? They can't find their house on that map. It is totally like Russian to them. So what do we do? Is that a real problem, Kim? And if so, what do we do about it? Or maybe it's not. You tell me. You're the social scientist here, which thank goodness for you.
And I will say, I shouldn't even pretend to be an expert in all things. I hope that nobody listening thinks that I think that of myself, or that anyone thinks that of me. Like I said, some things are questions that are outstanding in that they haven't fully been addressed. And I think this is one of them. Some of my own research involved what I called spatial reasoning. I was looking at how people interpret weather information, especially warnings, in that spatial context, and were they able to figure things out as storms got close to them, and how did they do that reasoning? What forecast information helped them do it? And when I was asking questions that were really in a very particular spatial context, I was actually really heartened to see what people said. I had this overwhelming sense, and this was with a very wide sweeping section of the public of the Southeast. I had this overwhelming sense that people had a good sense for where they were. But I will say, I do worry about the wayfinding capability that people might be losing as they export their brain essentially onto the device. I do think that and this is something that cognitive psychologists have suggested, spatial reasoning is just like anything else that you reason about. It's something that's like use it or lose it. If you aren't using it, I do become concerned that even people who do have decent reasoning skill at it may lose it. And especially the youngest generation coming up who never had to undertake wayfinding tasks on their own, they may struggle. So I don't, when I say that I have a very positive outlook on that particular question, it's not to say that I don't think things could change. I think it's something that we all need to be mindful of. With reasoning about, honestly, just about anything, because it's not just our spatial reasoning that we're exporting onto those devices. It's also, rudimentary math skills and everything else that people had to do kind of day-to-day living, balance a checkbook. No one who even does any calculation anymore to do that kind of task. But if you don't have some sorts of checks in that you try to insert into processes like that, all kinds of things can go wrong, and you just sort of lose a little bit of your self-reliance. So I think that it is something I'm concerned about for the future, more than I'm concerned about it being a present problem, if that makes sense. And I recognize, you're getting the people commenting who probably, I'm giving a very high level, like sort of most people I think are fine, but that does still leave the possibility that there are quite a lot of people out there who don't have really great sense of direction, spatial reasoning, and they may need help. So I think for people like me in the social sciences, one of the challenges we have is in knowing what to do with that. We can design something that works for 80% of the people, but shouldn't we worry about those 20% who struggle? What should the design standard be? Should we try to design things that work best for the people who are least able to understand and process the information? So I think you're seeing those people. You're seeing a lot of those voices of people who, for one reason or another, might have difficulty reasoning about space, and we want to do more to help those people.
Yeah, and it's like in 20%, they can be really loud.
Mm-hmm.
If 20% of the people cannot find their house on a map, and you start to just assume that everybody cannot find their house on a map, and do you dumb it down to the lowest common denominator when you are putting these graphics together in your newscast? During tornado coverage, I got that. I got no problem with that, because I've been here long enough. I know where every barn, Walmart, barbecue joint is within 100 miles of where I sit. And I can tell people where that tornado is located in a way that they can understand. The problem is leading up to the event with these outlooks, these severe weather probabilities from SPC, the outlooks, and that's where I have a problem with that. So it's a learning thing, and I think we have to back up the maps with some type of oral or video or some type of wording that people can understand. And there's no easy answer to all of this.
Do you feel like that's what all do you try to do? I mean, you mentioned landmarks are a thing that you try to do to help people to orient. And that's something that is definitely research backed. That there are some people who reason north, south, east, west, and they've got it. And there are some people for whom those ideas make no sense, and they navigate based on things like landmarks. What else do you think?
Look, listen, if I get on television and say there's a tornado 14 miles southwest of Clanton, Alabama, people don't know where that is. If they've lived there all their life, they don't know where that is. I'm not so sure I know where that is. But if I say that tornado is really close to Jim's Pit Barbecue, everybody in Billingsley, Alabama, they know where that is. And it's the same thing with maybe a large landowner in a small community. Everybody knows where Jim Bird's farm is in Demopolis, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Or the Walmart. Everybody knows where the Walmart is, or some known landmark. And you have to understand the culture of these different smaller towns to know which reference to use, which is another great positive of speaking in schools every day and doing science programs. So I go to these conferences, and I've had people say over and over, why do you waste your time going to see 100 third graders to talk about weather? Well, come on, man. That's a win-win-win-win-win-win-win for everybody. Number one, there were some people that got me really excited about science when I was in third grade. The least I can do is return the favor. I feed back on that energy, and the teachers love it. The kids love it. The TV station loves it. We got the Kid Cam. They sell that as a franchise. They make some money off of it. But the other thing is, what you do is when you go speak with schools every day, is that you drive roads where people actually live. And yeah, you might have to be on the interstate for a while to get there, but you're going to get off that interstate and go through some roads where you're going to go to the school, and you will start to see things, and they will start to stick in your brain. And you can use that data on the air when there's a tornado situation, but that takes time. And that's one of the things that I've tried to encourage those in my business to understand. And I look, staying in a market for 2 or 3 years, when you're young, you're in a very small town and you're broke and you need to move up. I understand that. But this thing where people work in a town for 2 years and they're trying to I want to get to market size number 13, 11. It's like a countdown here. Here's an idea. You might find a place where it's really fun to live, and you want to raise a family there, and you want to stay there for more than 2 years and learn the people and the culture and the geography. When they moved me to Dallas, Kim, back in the 80s, before you were born, this was a long time ago, I have never been to Dallas in my life. And they told me on a Friday that I'm starting in Dallas, and I start on Monday. Goodness gracious. So here I was, where I've grown up in this place. So, and we had a new baby, we're in your shoes there, but what I started to do I didn't have a lot of school visits because nobody knew me. I was up against Harold Taft, the legend on Channel 5, and Troy Dungan, the legend, the bow tie guy on Channel 8. So I just started driving, like Forrest Gump started running. I just started driving. I mean, I drove up to Sherman and Denison. I drove up to McKinney. We lived in Plano. I drove over to Greenville. And before you know it, I drove over to Mineral Wells. I drove down to Waxahachie just to look and to see and back then, there were no Google Maps. That's the one thing about it. You can't pull up the Google Maps in the street level cars where they've got these photographs, but that was really important to do that. And so using landmarks to me is an important thing here. But I tell you what, let's pause for 1 second because Kevin's here. Ooh, hello, Kev. Can you talk yet? You might be on the air.
No, we just finished up.
Okay.
How are y'all?
So you just blew the show title that somebody suggested, James Angels.
Well,
and for a lot of people have never heard of Charlie's Angels, but
that might be dating too much. Yeah. Of course, there's a new Charlie's Angels movie coming on, I think. So maybe that's current again. I don't know.
That's true. So I tell you what, let's roll Tony's report. We're going to come back and we'll do a more detailed. I want to hear about these systems coming out of here. We'll talk to Aubrey, get an email, and much more here. Don't go away. This homegrown edition of WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Mercury is the most difficult planet to catch. It spends most of its time so close to the sun from our vantage point here on Earth that we can't make it out. We get a better shot of seeing it with the naked eye about 6 times each year. That's when it's at its greatest elongation, or angular separation from the sun. Even then, though, this innermost planet is usually so low on the horizon that it gets lost behind the clutter of trees and buildings. The pre-dawn trick of catching Mercury is to go out early enough that the sky is sufficiently dark, but late enough that the planet has risen sufficiently above all that clutter. This week offers that chance. Mercury again reaches the point of greatest western elongation this week, but it's also at its highest in the morning sky, around 20 degrees above the horizon, depending on your location. Look to the southwest about 45 minutes before sunrise this week to spot the tiny planet. And if you look up and slightly to the right, you'll also see Mars. Elsewhere in the sky, Tuesday, November 26 marks the 8th launch anniversary of the Mars Curiosity rover and the first land anniversary of the InSight mission. The last weather report from InSight's position just north of the equator at Elysium Planitia was the high of -10 Fahrenheit and a low of -153, with an atmospheric pressure of just shy of 7 millibars. So that's why even those most recent observations of winds gusting from the south-southeast at 46 miles an hour would probably not be noticeable if you were standing on the surface. There's just not enough atmosphere there. Day-night temperature differences are a bit narrower at Gale Crater as reported by the Curiosity rover just south of the equator, where temperatures range from -78 to -25. You can get the latest Mars weather conditions by following the Twitter account Mars WX Report. It's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We're doing this show on the 25th of November. Let's go to Kevin. Kevin, so you've got 2 storm systems to deal with.
Yeah, we're kind of on the wave train, I think you called it last week. And so it's going to be interesting tomorrow. We're actually under a high wind warning for most of the region, suggesting wind gusts 50 to even 60 miles per hour. And we did that a couple of weeks ago here, especially our DMA sort of splits north and south, Oklahoma and Texas. So north of the Red River, we expect some windy conditions. And Thanksgiving Day looks cold and wet, maybe some severe with the next thing coming along on Friday. So it's really kind of an adventure.
Awesome.
I was dipping in and out of your coverage there. You and Kim talking. I can't wait to go back and listen to it. Sounded like it was a lot of societal impact. Did you plug our thing, Kim? Should we plug our thing?
You know what?
Oh,
I was
you
just
should plug
thinking
the thing.
about that. Yeah, we're definitely one of the things that James actually asked me to do was to rate broadcasters on how well they are taking in social science insights. And I said very much that the heart is there. But something that did come to mind, there was so much in that question that one could say, but an important thing is what you have been hammering on, and that is that it can be hard to dig into these big reports and to get the
Yes.
kernels of wisdom. So talk a little bit about that. What is it that you're hoping to see accomplished?
Well, the short way, I have two short ways of describing it. Number one is taking the big, thick PhD written things from PhDs, who we love, of course, but try and make them a little less PhD speak and make the graphics and the charts and all the numbers and things a little bit easier to ingest. And the other way, I keep giving this example. It's been probably last year, I think now. When GOES 16 came out, there were a ton of new things, right? And we're fortunate enough to be in a wonderful split between Dallas, Fort Worth, and Norman. And there's a great forecaster, Dr. Vivek Mahali at the National Weather Service office with Rick in Norman. And there was one day he sent out a tutorial on using GOES 16 stuff. And our weekend guy, Michael Bowling, was in the office and he saw the email come through and he looked over to me and he said, "Hey, Vivek sent out a tutorial on GOES 16. And I went, "Yay." And then about 2 minutes later, he said, "It's 47 pages. And I went, "Oh, crap." And because that's a big giant thing. But then I got thinking, well, wouldn't that be nice, a page a day or even half a page a day? And I could do that certainly, but there's all of this stuff coming out from Kim and colleagues there in Norman and elsewhere. And I just kind of started to think, well, wouldn't it be neat if we could just get little bits and pieces of that, rather than having to sit down and ingest a whole thing, and get these little pieces and be able to get a comment from a researcher, a comment from a broadcaster, and then have a discussion. So Weather Insights, it's actually WX Insights, is going to be primarily a blog hosted by OU, but we'll promote it on the Broadcast Meteorologist Facebook group, and there'll be social feeds for it. But we'll put these things out, and we're still trying to figure out how often they will be and what they will be and so on and so forth. But the basic idea is to have little pieces of ingestible information that we can take in and go, "Hey, that's interesting. What about X?" Or have a discussion. And then it's the chance for the researchers to say to us, "Here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing." And then it's a chance for us to go back in the other direction and say, "Well, yeah, we'd like to know about this and that." And that gives them some guidance as well. Is that fair, Kim? Can we add something to it, make it sound better than what I just said?
No, I think it's great. Kevin has been doing the legwork of trying to read some of this work and be that bridge that he wants to see in the world. And I know it can be a slog. So it's great. But he just demoed his first example of what one of these would look like. And I thought it was so neat. I mean, I'm a researcher and I learned from it too. He took a little piece of research, plotted here's a graph of something from a really big survey of the public. And here's what the researcher said about it. Here's what I say about it. Here are the questions I have. And when you see those things lined up together, it's this dialogue, and it suddenly all makes sense why we have some of the places of intersection we do between these communities, and some of the disconnects and some of the challenges. That'll be good fodder for us, I think, in the research world too, to try to look at what we're doing through your lens and say, "Oh, that's how you think about it. Okay, I can do something with that."
One of the most fascinating things that Rick Smith ever said, and I don't think he said it on the show, it might have been when I was up there one day, but it was really interesting because you and Rick, you guys work hand in hand now, but y'all have been in the building up there a couple of years, right? And Rick said, it's probably a little bit over a year after you arrived, I remember him saying, the social science people showed up, and he said, it really took us about a year between the operational people and the social people, the physical science people and the psychological science people, to learn to talk to each other, which was fascinating to me, because we really are speaking different languages. And I'm kind of looking at this, like Kim said, being a bridge between the two. And I'm terrified now because I've had my foot in one, but I've gotten to go up and kind of stand in the corner on some of the stuff that you mentioned, Kenzie stuff with the emergency manager people I heard you talk about a little while ago, and see some of the facets stuff. And I'm 50% terrified of facets and 50% fascinated as well. But putting this stuff out in the wild is going to be really, really amazing. And so I was actually literally kind of scared about it. And then I thought, well, it took me a couple of days to calm down. And I thought to myself, okay, and maybe Kim's had the same experience. I thought, okay, this stuff is coming. And so we're going to have to deal with it. We're not going to be perfect, as you said on this show a little while ago when I was stepping into and listening here and there. We're definitely not going to be perfect, and we're going to have to accept that. But if we all sit and talk about it, then I think we end up being better than getting into like a pops thing, which you did. So I'm like I said, I'm anxious to go back and listen to the show. I tell you, here's another short way to say it. In sitting with Kim and sitting with some of the people around her in her orbit in the office there, I hear the term interesting a lot. Somebody brings up a point and all the researchers go, interesting. And then me as a broadcaster, and I've shared a couple of the things that we're working on with some colleagues in other markets, and they're really interested in it too, but we're looking for actionable things. And I think that's what James wants too. Mm-hmm. And so the answer to that is a lot of times there isn't a clear answer yet. And so the research people go, interesting. And then we go, well, actionable, what do we do? And you guys go, oh, well, it's not really clear or defined yet. And that's not your fault. I mean, at the end of the day, we're dealing with humans, and humans are really messy. So again, I default back to, we're going to have a dialogue about this, and it's not going to be perfect, but it will be interesting. But the North Star on this, which I keep using as a term for Kim and the researchers, is I've said to them, let's make this statement. I, insert researcher name here, want broadcasters to know blank. And that's the simple thing. And that's our North Star. And then in return, we will eventually tell y'all what we think of that and things that we would like to hear as well. But everybody I've shared it with so far has gone, oh, this is really cool. And it's really just been simple things so far. It's things out of these surveys, but they do bring up some very challenging. I don't know how all of them have not had their heads explode, because I was there for 10 minutes and my head exploded, but I'm not very bright. So fortunately they're smarter than I am. But the thing is there's nothing there yet really to see. It's wxinsights.com, and there's a blog, and you can sign up by email and you can follow the social feeds. I'm really waiting for all the static I'm going to get by creating social media accounts for this.
Yeah, about to say social media feeds. What's that?
I know. It legitimately is a real challenge for me. But I've mentioned this guy Tristan Harris, who's doing this podcast, Your Undivided Attention. He's an ethics researcher on the internet, and he kind of turned me around a little bit. He said, "Look, this stuff is here. We have to deal with it, kind of like coming facets. So why shouldn't we do our best to guide it in a good and productive direction?" So that turned me a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. But I don't have any choice. I mean, we kind of have to, because that's where everybody is. The broadcast meteorologist group, I think now is like 1,600 people in that group, which will probably make for some unwieldy conversations, but we got to do it, because I don't know. Kim, is facet stuff scary to you in some ways?
Oh yeah.
Oh, good. You want to think about it?
I think we have to be very conscious of the choices that we make, and very judicious in what goes out.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to see a fire hose that no one can grapple with. And I think that we've done a disservice if we do that. And I think we all feel that way, everyone in the program. So at least I think there's a healthy amount of fear that's necessary if you're going to be a conscientious and diligent researcher. And I certainly feel it.
But let me ask you this. Have you guys talked about this yet? Because I haven't asked you this yet. I mean, the best, most brilliant minds in this numerical weather prediction field are there, and they're working on this, but it's not going to be too long before other people figure this stuff out too. And they're not going to be guided by the same motivations that maybe we are. There's going to be financial motivations and things like that. And so have you all talked about that?
Some, to be very honest, the sort of operational model is still getting fleshed out a little bit, how this will all get out to the public. I think we'll do our best job if we can at least get all of the major players on board at the beginning. So do some good stakeholder engagement work and bring in all of you. I mean, actually, you know, of the panelists here, it's only James who hasn't been to our test bed. Audrey came and Kevin came. And
James, you need to go.
I know.
Have you seen some of the facets graphics, James?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
it's a cross between being so excited and so
Yep.
horrified.
Yep.
I mean,
I mean, Aubrey, what was your experience when you were? Did you feel scared at first and then kind of better, or
I did. I was like,
worse?
what in the world is this? Are we going to be able to do this? And then you're fascinated and you're going, okay, I like this. This is interesting. I can see the progression, and you know, it's fascinating, and you can kind of see where it's really working its way out, and you can really see the advantages that this will have. But it's scary, and it's,
if
what is the
delivered
public
responsibly.
exactly,
right?
and what
Because
is
now
the,
you put this in the hands of Barry Myers and all bets are off.
and how does the public respond to this, and what is the best way to communicate this? And I think that was the
Yes.
big thing is,
Mhm.
okay, this is how I'm thinking of interpreting this, but how do I try to communicate this as best as I can?
Right. And I think one of the ways to combat that, and this is years off, but I think one of the ways is to really work to make, for lack of a better term, canonical sources. Because one of the things Kim's taught us already is you know, people will go and do verification. They look for one or two or three sources during a thing or whatever. But there really should be a canonical source that is trusted and not motivated by you know, commercial interests necessarily. That's a big discussion. Did y'all see this today? I think it was just today or over the weekend. Maybe it was today that Tim Berners-Lee, you know, the founder of the web, has come out with this this 9-point guide for fixing the internet. These guidelines for companies and governments and people about what they should and shouldn't be doing. And this kind of falls under that. I mean, a lot of it is geared toward the commercial web and surveillance capitalism and all those kinds of things. But he came out with that today, and it's because the commercial interests and the surveillance capitalism interests of Google and Facebook primarily have really taken over the web. And so many hanger-oners now are doing the same thing. Like, well, I mean, you know, everybody else is taking this piece of data and that piece of data. There was a thing the other day. It was somebody was referencing it's some sort of a financial app. It's like, you know, you use this app on your phone to get loans and things, and it's collecting all of these data points on you. And one of the data points, believe it or not, that is to determine for this app whether or not you're a good risk for a loan is your battery status. Because they're saying,
wow,
yes,
wow.
if you let your battery go down to 8%, it's a signal to them, amongst many signals, but it's a signal to them that you are irresponsible.
Can I
Which
just
is
say my
fascinating
phone
to
is
me.
Dead.
Yeah,
Dead.
right.
Well,
Well,
apparently loaned to me.
well, but see, isn't this fascinating?
60%.
Okay, so we can loan money to
I would
Aubrey.
get the loan.
Yeah, well, but it's interesting to me because
Kim would get denied.
I actively manage my battery because I think that it runs a certain number of cycles and so on and so forth, but I'll intentionally let mine go down because now batteries don't get a memory anymore, but I'm actively managing it. And again, there are other data points, but to say that they're checking your battery status and that Apple and Google are allowing them to do that, what else are they getting? And so this is how they build profiles of you, which is fascinating.
Apple's giving it information. I'm surprised because
I'm
Apple's
pretty sure
like, we're the security people. Your data is safe with us.
Well, and see, who thought back in the day, and I don't know specifically if Apple was doing it or not, but who thought back in the day that you would care for that piece of information? And Apple might want it for technical reasons, right? They want to see how, and there's some legitimate reason, I assume, to know how often people are letting them wind down, or they recharge them, you know, at 60% or whatever. But the amount of data that's collected on you is staggering, but then what they're doing with it is more staggering. You see, because the battery thing goes into a profile made up of a bunch of data points. And that's how they're saying, yes, you can have this loan, or no, you can't have this loan, or any other thing. And those are just going to grow and grow and grow, because all of the companies now they're all following the lead, going, whoa, we need this data too. And that's being allowed. And that's part of the Berners-Lee thing. I don't know if I can make that my pick of the week. I'll have to go see if I can find the article. It's pretty interesting. It was in The Guardian, I think.
All right. Well, I tell you what, guys, because I've got to be the lead back in here, as you know. So let's do picks of the week. Aubrey will do email next week. We'll do a double email segment. So let's do picks of the week. Let's go right to Aubrey while she's here. And Aubrey, do you have a pick of the week for us?
I actually don't. I don't have a pick of the week because I've been dancing all night. So you know what? And you were just lucky enough to get my presents tonight. So that's my pick.
That's it.
I'll take a double foghorn for that.
That's awesome. No, for Kev, it was 1 minute to showtime. I was the only guy on here. The only soul was me. I'm thinking, wow. So Aubrey bailed me out. She was the first one to show up here. All right, Kim, what's your pick of the week?
All right. I'm trying to remember what I sent you all. Oh, good gracious. Come back to me. I forgot what I sent you.
Okay. So my pick, this is a piece that is a photographer that spent 7 years chasing storms through Tornado Alley. Here are 15 of his most breathtaking photos. And this was published on November 11th, 2019. And goodness, we've all seen how many pictures of tornadoes and severe storms in our lifetimes, but these are really good. The guy's name is Eric Miola. And he is pretty famous photographer. He's done work with Bruce Springsteen, some other famous people, but he decided to get away from these stars and go shoot tornadoes. And his stuff is pretty good. So that is my pick. Kev, what's your pick of the week?
I haven't found it yet, but I'm going to find this article about the Tim Berners-Lee, fixing the web article.
Okay. And again, all these will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Kim, we're floating back to you.
Great. So my pick of the week is a Nature article that just came out a couple days ago. And it's about challenging the social science community that does post-disaster work. So that goes and interviews survivors from tornadoes, for example, or hurricanes or floods or even winter storms, what have you. Challenging us to have a higher degree of ethics. And by that, I mean, something that's actually sort of become a practical matter in the Southeast. We've felt the pressure with Vortex Southeast, if an event happens like the Lee County Day, you might have researchers who descend on that area, several people who want to talk to the exact same survivors, the same emergency managers. And we go and we do research. We get great publications out of that. Does the knowledge ever come back to the community? Do they ever get to learn something from that? And is it right for them to have that burden after the aftermath of the storm? For them to be meeting up with us, are there ways where we can work to the community's benefit in a more direct way and to lighten our touch so that we don't have such a big footprint when we do come in after disasters? And I thought that it was an extremely compelling article, a very important piece of work. And one of the co-authors on it is the director of the Natural Hazard Center. Her name is Lori Peak, and she's probably one of the world's most wonderful people, just a delightful human. And so I think you can read it as a non-researcher. Anyone can read this and really resonate with it. And I think you'll understand a lot more of my world and some of the things we're thinking about in the social science when you read it.
Awesome. Well, good deal. Well, listen, thanks to all of you for being on the show here this week. I hate to wrap it up because the discussion has been so good, but I've got to wrap it up. We've got the news coming on here. So thanks for listening. We're typically here every Monday night at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Live.bigbrains.media.com is how many people watch. And if you listen to us, we thank you for that. Show notes on the website, weatherbrains.com, our social media accounts there as well. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. That turned out to be a good show, Kim. Thanks. That was good stuff.
Oh, thank you. You had wonderful questions. That was a great discussion. I'm glad that I could be here.
I can't wait to go back and listen to that. Yeah, I got
right.
little bits and pieces.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
You
Happy